Let's talk more about the require function. Is require only able to grab a single JavaScript file? What if the module I want to build is quite large and needs to be split into several files? Is there any other kinds of files I can require other than JS files? Let's see. All right, so I have an empty app.js file, and I'm going to create another greet module. But let's suppose this time it's a bit more complex. Maybe I'll greet in multiple languages. And a single JavaScript file just becomes too difficult to maintain. Well, the require function had a lot of code in it, if you remember. And one thing it did was look for a file of the .js extension based on the path you give it. But if it doesn't find that .js file, it will do something else. I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder called greet. I can require greet, and since there is no greet.js file, the require function will instead look for a greet folder. And then it will look inside that greet folder for a file simply called index.js. So if it can't find greet.js, it looks for a folder and will look for index.js inside of it. So I have a module that I can require with a single line, just say require greet. However, I can now have multiple files inside the greet folder that work together and are ultimately called by index.js. So let's build out my module. Let's suppose I want an English greeting file. This will manage any rules and things I want for greeting in English. So I'll go ahead and create a greet function. We'll keep it very simple. And then, remember, this is wrapped in a function expression. So I have a parameter passed to this function secretly behind the scenes, so I can use it. Module.exports equals greet. So module is passed to this function, and it has an exports parameter on it. And this JS file really is run as a function. Remember that. So I'm making this a function so I can use it. And then I'll just take this exact same thing. I'll make a new file, Spanish.js. And instead of hello, we'll say hola. And I'll also make this available outside the module using the module object and the exports property. And then attach greet to it, or set it equal to greet. So now I have two JS files, each identical really, but the greet function in each case outputs in a different language. Then I want to make this available to use as a complete module. So I can use require inside index.js and then require index.js itself using the greet folder. Let's try it. So I'm going to say, let's say English is the greeting I want, so I'll require, then I'll do in quotes, the path is a string, a // to say it's at the same level in the same folder location as this file I'm working in. And I'm working in index.js, and English and Spanish are in the same level here. And I'll just say English. I don't need to put .js. The require function will figure that out. And Spanish. Then I'm going to make all of this available as a single module. So I have module.exports. That's what will get returned from require when this is required. And then I could just make an object. And this object will have these two methods on it. A typical pattern is actually for the name. Remember, this is a name-value pair. I'm using object literal syntax. The name and the name of the variable to be the same. That looks a little strange, but don't be confused by it. This is the name, just the name English, that's the name of the property, and this is the value, the name of the variable. The fact that they match just makes my life a little bit easier in understanding which is which and in typing. So when I require this, what I'll have is an object with two methods on it, two functions, one called English and one called Spanish. Let's try using it. I'll go back to my app.js file, and I'll go require the module. the require function I will call, which again was made available to me because this code is wrapped in that function expression, and require is a parameter that's passed to it. And I'll do what I did before, /greet. But there is no greet.js file. So instead it will grab that folder and look for index.js, run that, and when it runs it, it'll give me back this object. So greet will now be that object, and that object has two methods, greet.english, and I'll do greet.spanish. Those were the names of the methods that I gave them. So when I run this app.js file, the require function will run, go to the greet folder, process the index. The first thing it will do is require, run the require function again because of require, find the english.js file, get that back, set that equal to the results of it. The Spanish variable will be equal to the results of require for spanish.js, what's attached to module.exports or what module.exports has been set equal to. And then I will then, in this index.js file, see that the exports property of the module object is this new object that's been created with those two methods attached to it. So we've used require twice here, one at this level and then one at the app.js level. And you can see how we're building slowly this module together. And then I now have a single object which has access to all the features that I wanted it to, that I exposed, but that are actually split up amongst multiple files. But I only needed to require it once. So I'll go ahead and run this. And there we have it. Hello and hola. Make sense? Be sure to try this yourself, as you should with all of the code in this course. This is especially something that you need to do for yourself to make sure you have your head wrapped around how we're structuring the module, different files, and pulling them together using require and module.exports. So let's add one more feature. And we'll use the ability that the require function has within Node to process a .json file. So let's go to my folder and add a new file. We'll call it greetings.json. Now a JSON file, we mean that it's just holding text that's formatted in the JSON format that many programming languages have features to understand, and JavaScript understands quite well and can generate. So this isn't JavaScript, this is just text, but JavaScript will be able to read this text and then convert it into a JavaScript object. So in curly braces, I'll put en in quotes, as JSON requires, as my name, and my value will be hello. And then es for Spanish or Español, and hola. There, that's my data. And JavaScript can read this and convert it into an object, much like it does with object literal syntax. So the require function will actually do that for me. So I'll go over to my english.js file, and instead of just having the string hello, I'll go get the greetings data from the JSON file. So I'll say var, and I'll call my variable greetings, and I'll require, and then in a string I'll put /greetings.json. So I'll explicitly go get that .json file. What happens? Well, let's go ahead and debug this. I'll put a breakpoint, then debug, and I'll step one more past this line. And now let's look at our greetings object. There, it has the property en with the value of hello and the property es with the value of hola. So the JSON file was read and its contents were converted into a JavaScript object. And then instead of having to worry about module.exports or something like that, in the case of a JSON file, the require function simply returned the object that it created from the file. All right, so I'll stop this, and let's use it. So I could say greetings.en, en being the property. And then I can do this exact same thing over in the Spanish one. Now, this might not be the best structure in a real-world application as far as I'm repeating myself a lot, so I could make this a bit better, and you could try that if you like. But this is a good example of how we're using these modules and JSON files together. So in this case, I said greetings.es. So, and I run this, same output. Only this time it went and got these strings from the JSON file. Pretty neat, right? And notice how deeply we're using require. In app.js, I'm requiring greet, which gets the folder, goes to index.js, which requires each of these other JS files, and then there I'm requiring the JSON file. This is how your Node programs will be structured. You'll do a lot of module creation and using require, which will allow you to nicely segment your code in a manageable way and in a way that makes it easy for other developers or yourself much later after you've forgotten how things work in your application to come back and debug, add features, etc. And by the way, in the real world, you might use a JSON file. You might use it during development to store some test data. You might even use it for some configurations to store a config file for your application, but configurations that don't need to be secure. So there is a use for that. All right, so that's a bit more of what require can do. There's even more, and we'll see that in a bit.